We are live. Dennis, over to you.
Well, welcome to Legal AI Live, and we're excited to be here. I think it's been an interesting time in the last month for AI. I sort of think of it as moving into a maturation phase. So we're past that sense of wonder into actual implementation reality. And so we'll talk a little bit about that, I think, in this show. But just as a reminder, in this podcast, we focus on the practical all the time and what lawyers are actually doing with AI, not just theory and hypotheticals. Also, I spoke at the annual meeting of the National Association of Women Judges last week about AI and self-represented litigants. So I have some fresh perspectives to share on those topics and some insights from judges that I was able to talk to. But first, we'll go around the horn, and I'll introduce myself last, I think. But let's go to Matthew and do a quick round of introductions.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Dennis. Looking forward to hear more about that talk or that event that you were at. I'm Matthew Kurbis. I'm a subscription attorney. I have an award-winning tech-powered law firm that serves the latent legal market of folks and small business owners in Illinois using the subscription model. And I have a podcast, Law Subscribed, where I interview other folks and we talk about it.
Let's go to Greg, I guess.
Hello, I'm Greg Kochansky, Vice President of Thought Leadership at the American Arbitration Association, where I am involved mostly in running our AAA ICDR Institute, which is our think tank that's primarily focused on AI and ADR and access to justice.
And Damien.
Damien Real. I'm with VLEX until probably a week from now when I will be part of Clio. I build things and I talk about the stuff I've built.
And Gio.
George Bellis, suburban Chicago, business litigation, avid user of AI and advocate for its use.
Great. And I'm Dennis Kennedy. And I guess since our last episode, my big news is that I've officially retired from Michigan State University. And I've been named Professor Emeritus and Director Emeritus of the Center for Law, Technology, and Innovation. So I'm still going to be teaching as an adjunct at the University of Michigan Law School in the spring semester. And I co-host the Kennedy Mile Report podcast on the Legal Talk Network. And for those who want to know, I'm now focusing on my personal innovation research institute that I call the Kennedy Idea Propulsion Laboratory. So we like to start every episode with something I did when I taught the AI and law class at MSU with my students. And that is, I just asked the question, what did you try in AI that you might like to share? Matthew.
Gosh, I've just been using Notebook LM a bunch. I will say that I just read today that Google is also letting you ground any sort of writing that you're doing inside of Google Docs, if you have the Gemini feature turned on, from any kind of documents. And so that's really exciting. I just think the existing tools in place are getting better and better. I like the granularity with which I'm able to use some of the additional features now inside of Notebook LM. Paxton has also released some interesting new features that a huge complaint I've been having with Paxton is I have to be in these different modules, right? I have to be in legal assistant or the research modules. But now what they're letting us do is I'm now able to, and I've just been able to test this out with only one client file, where I can now activate its research database when doing drafting and document analysis. I used to have to do those in different modules. Now they're slowly rolling out, combining that. So that's exciting. Again, I've only tested it once. So far, so good, but still some more testing to do in that space. And then, Perplexity, I think, is just getting better and better, too, as far as me being able to leverage it for any kind of how-to this and that. I find I'm doing the deep research feature less and less often and getting better results in just the standard best, pick the best model, dealer's choice with which model to answer the inquiry. And I'm finding I'm doing shorter and shorter initial prompts and more back and forth with the tools without it losing where it was, and that aspect of the things are getting better, at least in my trio of AI tools I've been using.
Great. How about you, Greg?
So I've been testing out a AI writing partner tool that's called Spiral. And it's not like incredibly, I don't know, maybe it is innovative. It feels relatively familiar to me, but it allows you to have a conversation with the AI and have it be more of a writing partner to you. I guess there are some limitations for using it in, in a business context if you're working with confidential info or whatever. But I wonder if just some of the design patterns in there might be reproducible in GPT. So I'm excited to dig into that more.
And Damien.
I've got out of a show and tell version of this. This is a real world case. Greetings from St. Paul, Minnesota, where you can see that this is my house on the left-hand side and my neighbor on the right-hand side want to build a fence right up to the property line, which you can see right here. So this is what Google has said, that if they build right up on the property line, you can see it goes right without enough fire. There should be 3 feet between all of them. So what I did is I took my facts. For 16 years, I've been walking and maintaining through more a 60-inch corridor between my house. And so I've given my facts, and I said that my goals under Minnesota law, I'm entitled to be able to demonstrate that the case law shows that the building offense would be unlawful. And then Vincent said, oh, maybe you have an adverse possession claim, prescriptive easement claim, boundary by practical location, equitable estoppel, unlawfulness of blocking access. And for each of those, each of those give me about 40 pages worth of non-hallucinated cases, statutes and regs, and secondary materials with non-hallucinated text to be able to say, here's a memo on adverse possession, and here's a memo on others. So then I took that bunch of documents and I said, now create an affidavit of Damien Real proving each of the elements of each of the claims. So here's the Damien Real affidavit that's right here. And I said, now create a complaint in Ramsey County District Court alleging each of these. And so I jammed with it, and then it created a complaint that you can see right here that includes all sorts of other things that I added. So I did everything I just showed you while I was walking through the Arizona Supreme Court hallway, while I was about to give a presentation to the Arizona Supreme Court. So I literally vibe coded this complaint. And I think this is an indication of that. My opposing counsel, by the way, just gave me a response that is a responsive email that I just jammed a little bit, and I'm now going to be responding to it via email. So I think that opposing counsel probably spent about 12 hours responding to this thing, and they're essentially bringing a knife to a gunfight. So we'll see how this shakes out.
I love that approach of saying to the AI, here are the elements, now draft this complaint that shows that all these elements are in here, and it just does that. And I think that's sort of this meta use of AI that lawyers kind of overlook as they focus on saying, like, just find me the cases. Yeah. Gio, what about you?
Well, I was looking forward to going after Damien because I wanted to hear more about what's going on with Clio, because I'm excited about what Clio's announcing in terms of using their AI. I fiddled around with Clio and Duo for a while, and I was sorely disappointed. But now since I'm an avid Clio user, I'm kind of excited about seeing how the new AI will factor into that. And I'd like to hear more from Damien about what's going on with that. Let's see, in the last couple of weeks, one of my staff drafted a memorandum to file with the court. Turned out there were a couple of hallucinated cases in it. Found out why she didn't follow the office policy. She used ChatGPT, and she didn't verify everything. So my former employee made a mistake. But the point is that we have a policy in place, and people have to follow it about how to use it. The other thing I'm really having fun with lately is Lexis. I think Lexis is getting a lot more robust in its use of AI. They have a feature in it called Vault, where you dump your documents pertaining to a particular matter into the vault. And now it has all the documents for your case in it. And we've asked it to do things like analyze our complaint, analyze the opponent's complaint. I just asked it I have a case in which my client has been served with a couple of reservation of rights letters by a couple of insurance companies. So I ran all that through the AI in Lexis after putting everything into the vault, and I got a fairly significant and sophisticated answer, pretty much what I expected, but disappointed that I got what I expected. But I think I'm using it more like I would a colleague and bouncing things off. So I'm having more conversations with the AIs that I'm using, and I'm getting more and more disenchanted with chat and more enchanted with Perplexity. I'm following in Matthew's steps there with Perplexity. But I'm having more conversations with it like a colleague. I'm asking it questions. We have a question that maybe has an ethical issue to it, and it actually talks to us like a colleague. And I got the idea to do that because I had two people tell me that they were using ChatGPT like a counselor. They were putting their their problems into chat and then having a conversation about how to resolve the issues with their families and things like that. And it struck me that if they could have that kind of conversation with an AI about their emotional and personal problems, then why can't I have a similar conversation with the AI? So I think I'm using it more like a conversation. I'm repeating myself, but I can't think of a better use of it for me right now.
Yeah, that's a notion of AI as thought partner that we talk about occasionally. I just think that's such a useful concept for as you start to experiment with AI. So I wanted to give an example of a success and a failure in things I've done. And I've been using Google Gemini Pro primarily these days. So I was going camping at my father's farm in Indiana, which I'm familiar with, but not totally familiar with. And so I grabbed the satellite map for the property. And you can zoom in a fair amount, but then it really starts to pixelate. So there were a couple of areas that looked like they might be potential campsites, but I couldn't figure. I said, well, I'm still going to have to walk it and all of that. But then I threw the map into Google Gemini, and it came back and it analyzed it and said things like, this site is really good for these reasons, but you need to be careful if you go to the east because there's a big ravine there. Now, there's no way I couldn't see the ravine on the map, but it was amazing. And it was an example of where I said, what the heck? I'll just try it and see what happens because maybe the AIs have advanced. So this is my success. And I actually used it to go from there to pick the actual campsite. My failure story was like a fairly standard use. So the presentation I was doing for the National Association of Women Judges, I just wanted to generate images for the slides. And so it did it, but it took a long time and it was really balky. And I had to start over and I had to move from Gemini from one session to another. I think I went into Claude for some other things. And it took a long time. And I was kind of frustrated with the whole process because I thought it would work better sort of out of the box. On the other hand, afterwards, a couple of judges said that they thought my images of my slides were fantastic, that they really fit what they were doing. So it didn't save me time or anything. It took a lot of me being the human in the loop. But I got to where I wanted, but it's not as smoothly as I wanted. So the lesson here, I think, is that a couple things, so more than one. But one is that to always try things because the AI, the tools are changing. And so something that didn't work so well in the past might work better now. Or, so just give it a try. And then to kind of systematically test in the different models what it is that you're doing. And then, as I would say, document the successes and the failures. Because then that will tell you in the future things you might try or that you don't need to bother to try. So I think these are all cool things to try. And I think this is a really useful segment of this podcast. So I want to switch to something that we've seen a lot about this past week.
Well, hold on, Dennis, just if I can interrupt you, this is a live show. And so I put in the chat here, we got a question live, and I think it's important that we talk about it. Friend of the show, Ben Shore, has already answered in the chat, but we got a question from Chris Werner. Is there a concern when you're using the AI as a thought partner that the AI just wants to support whatever idea you present? Do you have tips for prompting the AI to critique your ideas? So while you all think about that question, I'll tell you one of the ways that I like to take care of this is I use multiple AI tools, right? So like unless there's something unique to the particular tool, like audio and video overviews, like with Notebook, something like legal research that I'll do exclusively in Paxton, unless it's outside of Paxton's resources, in which case I'll use Perplexity Pro, I will inquiry the same sort of inquiry that I'll have with my top three, with Notebook, with Perplexity, and with Paxton, and look at and all the results, going back to Damien's accordion method, right? And so that's one of the ways that I'm handling this, like, oh, is the AI just trying to support like what I want it to do? Now, one of the other ways around it is I'm using paid tools for everything. And so I just sort of feel like I'm just getting better quality and better engineering than just using the free tools. So there's something to be said about not just using a free ChatGPT version, which I'm still trying to get everyone to stop doing.
Yeah, that was hard to understand why people are still using the free tools. It's like almost I feel like I'm doing so like what they're talking about and what I'm talking about are so different. I almost can't even talk about it. So I do have a couple of tips. So I have a whole technique where I use persona AIs, which is kind of beyond the scope of this question, that really addresses this. But there are some things that you can do, which is, and so I do this thing, and I use this a lot on Perplexity. I just say, give me the pros and cons. And it does have a tendency to want to say, like, you're brilliant, which certain other tools, which I love, don't get me wrong. But sometimes you want to say, give me pros and cons, or you say, anything I missed is another one I do. I don't like to use devil's advocate. So there's a notion in the military called red teaming. So you say, like, red team this response for me, because if you ask for devil's advocate, it will basically, the AIs will talk you out of anything that you want to do. So there are a number of things, but it's sort of like you as a human in the loop say, I recognize there's this potential thing, so like give me the other side. And there are, like I said, simple ways of doing it. And I think that just typing in there pros and cons into the window actually does a pretty decent job to get you started. I don't know if others have thoughts.
I'm curious, has anybody tried asking it for a question? Assume you're the judge on this case, how would you react? Or
Yep.
how would you rule? I hadn't tried it, but I just thought about doing that.
I would even go look at the judge's bio and copy and paste it and say, you are this judge, right? Like give it all the context, right? They want to know what school they went to, how long they were in private practice, what courts they've been judged. Like give it like all that context and see what it says.
Westlaw does that just with the judges and your adversary. They have a feature that will do that.
Yeah, so people who experimented with that for a while. I just like the fact that AI can do that in a kind of quick and dirty way to get you started. And then, as you say, as it becomes your thought partner, then you start to ask questions. Go and you say, like, yeah, that's a start, but I don't think you've gone into depth on this. But this kind of brought out something for me. And then to go behind the scenes a little bit, I will confess that for the topics today that I put together, I asked the AI to be a stand-in for our likely audience and see how these topics would land with them. So, I think that I do that sometimes with presentations or articles. I say, here's this draft. How is this likely to land with my target audience? And it just gives me a start, and it'll point out some things. And it's, my feeling is if AI gets me to 60% or kind of guides me in the right direction or what to ask for next, then it's a big success. I don't look for anything close to perfection.
Yeah, to answer Gio's question as to anyone has ever tried this, not only have I tried it, but I actually built with my team this. So this is a judge and adjudicator workflow where I would build a bench memo as a lawyer, that as a judicial clerk for my judge. I would say, Your Honor, plaintiff says, defense says, judge, I think you should say. And that's what this is. So I uploaded all the briefs. And then here's the legal issue. What's the liability for slip and fall? Here's plaintiff's argument, and here's defense argument. Here's a summary of plaintiff's argument. Here's a verbatim excerpt of plaintiff's argument. And then here are the citations and the document citations. And we do that for all the legal issues. And then I have, what questions should I ask counsel? And by the way, not only do I do that, but I also do, what are the weaknesses of each side's case? So what are the plaintiff's weaknesses? This is kind of devil's advocate. Here's the weaknesses of that case, and here's the weaknesses of defense's case, open and obvious hazard, pre-existing conditions. Then I go out of the box. We say, what are the questions you can ask that exploit those weaknesses? Hey, can you provide evidence that the fall was solely due to the ongoing storm and not pre-existing conditions? How do you reconcile the open and obvious hazard with the plaintiff's claim? So this, you could be a prompt engineer and do everything I just did here, or you could just get it out of the box. So yeah, these are these are trivial to do what I just did, and it's surprising that other folks haven't done such things.
And producer note for the audio only listeners, of which we're approaching around 200. Damien's been shared his screen a couple times now. It's really useful. So if you're just listening to this, go to our YouTube channel, Legal AI Live, at Legal AI Live, or legalailive.com, because it's hard to find it on LinkedIn. So if you're listening to the audio version, those are the easiest ways to find the video.
Yeah, so Damien reminded me of something that I suggested in my presentation to the judges on self-represented litigants. So self-represented litigants are likely to throw all kinds of stuff at you. Could be handwritten, it's not going to be organized in a way. And then they come into court and they're totally stressed out. And then it's interesting that at the National Association of Women Judges, they've talked a bit about the customer experience in the courts. And for self-represented litigants, that's a really tough thing. But AI could certainly do this thing where if you're a judge, you could say, like, I have this mass of stuff from self-represented litigants. Can you put it together for me, summarize it, give me the name of the parties, give me the phonetic pronunciation, give me like these basic things. And so when the people show up for a hearing, the judge can pronounce your name correctly, be familiar with the case, all with the little one-page summary. And the customer experience of that has to be a tremendous improvement. And as a self-represented litigant, I would feel really good about it. And that was one of the things I suggested. If you were a court looking at a place to start an AI project, that one could be really interesting because that, self-represented litigants come in and, they don't even know whether the judge is looking at the right case while they're flipping through papers. So I think that could make just a great customer experience improvement. You guys ready for a new topic?
No, I want to, if you don't mind, Dennis,
go ahead.
Talking at the Women's Association of Judges, was there any discussion about, and Greg, I think we touched about this before too, about using AI to adjudicate matters?
No, because that was not what I wanted to do is to say, focus on everything other than AI being a judge and focus on the biggest problem your staff has and the court has with the self-represented litigants and where the pain points are. Focus on that first, because given institutional inertia, given budget cuts and other issues, the idea to say, like, let's go all out and try to adjudicate matters, I think that's a non-starter. Whereas if you say, hey, can we improve the customer experience in some ways for self-represented, that's possible, and it may take no money at all. So yeah, they absolutely, I moved them away from that, but I don't think that these judges, they saw it more, I think, as a helper, really, than as anything even close to replacing some of the things they would do.
I think you touched on something there, and then I don't think AI will ever do. Well, it may do, since it's responding to us, and that is, especially in the self-represented litigants and the small claims cases, people come to court and they just want to be, sorry about that, they want to be heard. They want somebody to listen to them. And if we in order to improve the customer experience with that, the judges just need to listen for a while and let them tell their story.
Right. But kind of, and the AI can kind of help structure some of that. And so that to me is a lot more interesting to say, it could be like at the AAA or even like a high-end corporate types of arbitration or other things like that, where you say, like, hey, we're willing to throw it to an AI first and see if that gets us to some resolution, at least a settlement direction. But I think at the lower end, it's going to be a little bit harder. I mean, there's an example of what China is doing with small claims cases, different laws, different approach, but they're at the small claims level, they're trying AI to actually adjudicate matters. So we'll at least get some kind of data we can look at. But I would say in the US, it's not highly likely. So I was pushing the judges to say, like, what can we do that's quick, that can be done in 30 to 90 days to test and wouldn't cost any money?
I do
Yeah,
think the potential of it as a tool to encourage settlement is, maybe not such a bridge too far. And, if the AI gets good enough at deciding who's ultimately going to win and it's really a crystal ball, then it's really not very rational to proceed through to a judgment. It makes a lot more sense, saves time and money to just, figure out some meeting of the minds and come to a settlement.
And I would also argue, yeah, I think you're right, Greg. And I would also say that anybody who's used ChatGPT's voice mode and knows that it's got an excellent bedside manner. So imagine if I, as a small claims litigant, and you as a small claims litigant, neither of us is a lawyer, talk with the AI that is built to be able to say, don't be sycophantic. Don't just say, oh, you've got a great case, but say, you've got a decent case, but here's the law. And under the law, you've got these weaknesses in the law. And, I know that you hate this, and I know that you think that the other side is a bad person. Let's talk this through. So imagine if both sides are getting this, and then if it's based on actual non-hallucinated cases, statutes, and regulations for those particular jurisdictions, I, as a litigant in small claims court, could chat with the bot at 3 a.m. after I get off my shift. And I'm not going to be limited to the 1 hour that I have right now with a lawyer, but maybe I can talk for 3 hours or 4 hours, and I can get all the vitriol out and be able to, get all the stuff off my chest. And then afterwards say, the bot has convinced me, maybe I just settled this case.
Right.
That's not out of the realm of possibility.
And what you're describing is, I think, very different from the traditional role of like a mediator who, typically would not overstep into that point of saying you're probably going to lose, or, here are the reasons you should settle.
Yeah,
So
but a good lawyer would.
A good lawyer would, sure. But this is also, it seems, more of a neutral outside party who, you're not necessarily paying, and who, maybe is credible in a different way as a result.
You could imagine setting up systems. So yes, you have the mediator bot in the middle, but you also have a separate plaintiff's bot, and you also have a separate defense bot. And so you can imagine the plaintiff's bot and the defense bot would say, hey, listen, you don't really have much of a case here, like a good lawyer would.
Yeah. Although you were reminding me, I knew some retired judges who became mediators, and I remember them saying, like, I need to go in and tell these people what they need to do. So, so human mediators don't always.
Oh, that's true. And a mediator statement kind of serves the same purpose as a last resort if the parties are at an impasse. So there are exceptions, certainly.
So let's go to what it was sort of a hot issue this week. And this is something I sure we'll all have different perspectives on about, vendor stability is the topic and what's happening. And my own view comes, and maybe there's things we're allowed to say and not allowed to say. So my view comes from decades of watching technology cycles play out, some of my recent conversations with people in the field, and some of the other things I'm doing. But the example, to me, it all starts out with the Legal Tech Hub's chart. I call it iChart of the legal AI companies, which is now like right around 900. And somebody made the joke that they should do like a logoed magnifying glass that they distribute to use with this chart. But when you look at that chart, you go, this can't sustain. So this week we were hearing of an AI company, Robin AI, with apparently, which was an early AI company for contract review, that is, you hear different things. So let's just say potential funding issues, other issues, maybe even a sale of the company in hand. And it raises the issue that it seems there's going to be a shakeout phase, because it happens in every technology cycle. But so whether we predict that or not, to me, it's like not really a prediction. It's going to happen. But I think the key thing for people to think about is what happens to your own workflows when a vendor you depend on struggles or disappears. Or another way of saying is, how in this environment do we put together a plan B when we think we've made like the best choice we have? So I don't know. I'll just go around the horn again. So Matthew, what do you got on that?
So sorry, Dennis, I had a client had an urgent thing, and so I was half listening. So if you could just, maybe somebody else will answer the question, and then I'll come back to it later.
I've got an initial thought, and others can chime in, but I think that really lawyers get clients based on trust. That is, do the clients trust the lawyers? And I would say the same thing happens with vendors. Do you trust your vendor to be around next week, next month, next year, so that I'm not left in the lurch if something bad happens? So I'd say that just like clients, trust their lawyers, I think lawyers should trust their vendors or not and choose accordingly.
Yeah, I guess I would say look at how much money they've raised if they're a startup too, because it's like, okay, that's their runway, to a certain extent. Now, you don't know what their burn rate is, and so you just never really know with that kind of a thing. But this is one of the reasons why I come back to the business model of these providers, where am I locked into a multi-year contract? Well, that's going to maybe make me more hesitant to sign up with one of these new, legal tech startups, right? Like, could I be month to month? Like, I'm month to month everywhere that I can be, especially in the legal tech space right now, because what if a better tool comes around? That's like a new tool. I want to be able to unsubscribe and use that other tool. Now I've actually have like this view of like a world of abundance. And so I don't think one AI tool is going to rule them all. I think we should all be using multiple AI tools. And I think that, like competition is a good thing, and they're feeding off of each other, and like, oh, there's this really good idea that this one, legal AI startup had, like, we might start to see how it's adopted and adapted in some of these other versions to the extent that it's useful and relevant, right? So like, I don't want there to be like a winner, but yeah, I mean, if you bet if that company's going under, or, they're not going to be around, I want my money back, right? So like, if I'm in a long-term contract, so for them, I think it's easier to get customers if you have month-to-month subscriptions. And so let's, and you could charge a premium for that. You could charge more, than you charge for the longer-term contracts, but give your customers, the law firms, the lawyers, options to subscribe month-to-month, and you solve that problem, I think.
And it's everywhere on the web these days, right? So it's it's $19.99 a month, or it's $150 a year. You make your choice. So I don't know what about you, Greg? Your thoughts on developing Plan B? Because I know I don't know whether you can talk about it, but I'm sure that's part of your thinking.
That ends part 1 of this month's Legal AI Live. Make sure to subscribe to the Legal AI Live podcast at legalailive.com to catch part 2. You could also subscribe to our new YouTube channel, or on any podcast app, just search Legal AI Live, and follow the Legal AI Live page on LinkedIn. See you next episode.